Good morning, everyone. This is Britt Simon. So let's talk about lottery questions that you may have. Obviously, some of you will be interested in any outcomes of DV 2020 or DV 2021. There is no decision from the appeal court yet. I know that the lawyers are thinking of trying to do something to try and cause some decision to be made. The lawyers are sort of, debating what's the best way forward for that. It may be that the appeal court doesn't even need that nudge, that they'll just, come back with some sort of answer. But we have to wait and see what's going to happen about that. There's no definite news yet. Let's talk about Ethiopia. 31K for Ashu is your quick in with the question here. But I've done various calculations for the Addis Ababa embassy, and in each of the calculations I do, you have a chance at 31K. It's not a great chance, it's not a certain chance, it's not 100% certain, but you have a chance. I think what's going to happen is that we're going to see numbers going up to first 23,000, and then there'll be a sort of a backtracking of numbers. It'll go back down to low case numbers, and there'll be some filling case numbers. And the same thing will happen at 26,500. And so that might impede the progress to get to 30, 31,000. Essentially what you need is for Addis to take a lot more cases than they've been taking recently. Fingers crossed for you. I hope that works out for you. How long on average does it take to process an AOS application on average? So the average cases for normal adjustment of status outside of DV lottery are normally sort of in the 9 or 10 month range, something about that. It can take longer, right? For DV lottery cases, I would say typically, and this is not a sort of a definite timeline, but typically you could say around about 2 or 3 months, maybe 4 months. It would be around about the sort of the average time. Now, I haven't really got statistics to back that up. I went through the adjustment of status process for DV lottery myself. Back in those days, there were some things you could do to try and speed things up. That's a little bit more difficult to do now. So the experience that you'll get will depend on your on the office, which office you're assigned to, and it's a little bit random. There's not really a dependable timescale you can give. Okay. Hi, you don't know anything about appeal decision door 21? Yeah, I don't know anything about it because there is nothing to know. There's not been a decision. Hyperson says, my case number is 2024 AS 12,000 something. I'm from Nepal. When will I get my 2NL? If you get your 2NL, which I hope you will, it will be towards the end of the year, probably August or September. Well, you'll get your 2NL in June or July for an August or September interview. That's basically how it will work. The 2NLs come out in June for August interviews and July for September interviews. And because of your case number, it's not going to be before then. So, that's what you're going to hope for. You're going to hope for an August or September interview. Okay. 59K Casablanca, any hope? Yeah, you've got some hope. Just have to wait and see. Casablanca are doing well, of course. So you just have to wait and see. Okay. DV 2023, that's over. DV 2023 is completely finished. There is no possibility of any case for any reason being issued another visa in DV 2023. So if that's your position, if that's what you're asking, then I'm afraid it's over. There's nothing else that can be done. How do I know how long I have to register my appointment before it's cancelled? Your appointment for DV lottery won't be cancelled because you don't register. It's just if you're going to follow the instructions that are given to you by the embassy, some of them ask you to register the appointment, or register, not really the appointment, but register with the courier service so that they can communicate with you and so that they can forward the passport to you after the interview. So the instruction is to set up an account with their online system, right? If you don't do that, your interview appointment won't be cancelled, but it could cause you a delay later in getting a passport sent to you, or you might miss information that comes to you before the interview. So it is best to just follow the instructions, as always. Follow the instructions, right? Cameroon 73K. Any hopes? Yeah, I think so. I think it really depends on the final number we see. Some of you may have noticed that my January estimate seems now to be quite pessimistic. We haven't reached the number that I'd estimated at that time, but I have increased my number, my number sort of projection for Africa to go now between 70 and 80,000 roughly. The reason I've increased it in my own mind, and I've spoken to many people about this, the reason I've increased it is because we've got worse than I hoped performance at a couple of the embassies, at some of the embassies. And so when a big embassy that has lots of selectees does very little work, it tends to give more chance to the highest case numbers or higher case numbers. It means the visa bulletin can go up further. So as Africa has had continuing problems in some of those embassies, it's actually good news, if you want to put it that way, for the higher case numbers. Now, I'm not saying that case numbers over 100,000 or something like that have a chance. I don't think they do. I don't think we're going to see current in Africa or any other region. There's no need for us to see current in any region. But it does mean that the number range can go a little bit higher than I originally had set. So that's, in a sense, that's good news, right? What's the chance to be selected in the EU region, says Joker? It's about it's less than 1%. So in other words, 1 in 100 years is what I typically tell people, because you can only enter one time in each year. So each person that enters would have to enter on average 100 years in order to be selected once. What does that mean? It means for many people, they'll never get selected, right? I've known people who've been trying 10, 15 years and never got selected, right? So that can happen. However, other people get selected on their first try. Some people get selected more than one time, right? It's a random draw. There's nothing predictable about it. It's just random. Myself and my wife, she was selected in the second attempt. So we tried 2 years between, each of us tried 2 years. I was not selected either year, and my wife was selected in our second year. And we did actually get the green cards through her selection. That was back in DV 2014, if you're interested. May the 4th be with you, indeed, Philip. So may the 4th be with you. Good luck to everybody next week. We're 1 week away, almost exactly 1 week away from now. Now, I'll give you a solid prediction, absolute perfect prediction here. What will happen is, I'll give you a couple of predictions. On the morning of the DV lottery being the announcement or the results coming out, I'm going to be pinged by people saying, "Hey, it's noon in my country and there's no results yet. What's wrong with the system?" And I'm going to respond to them, "Look, it's not noon in your country. It's noon on the Eastern time zone in America. That's when the results will be released, right?" And I'll then give you another prediction that at noon, their system will immediately go to crap. It will immediately start to be non-responsive, and people will get frustrated. And some people will have waited up in other countries, probably in some parts of Asia, in Africa, in Europe, etc. They might even be waiting up for that time, because that's going to be fairly late at night for some of the people in Eastern Europe, for example. And they will wait up, and then they're going to get frustrated. They're going to have a long wait. It takes several hours before that system will sort of regain its performance. And that's purely because they get a massive number of people, all the selectees, all the entries, go in and check their entries as soon as that noon time comes around. So the server performance goes from nothing to maxed out in a heartbeat. And at noon, a few seconds past noon, it will start to crash. And it won't actually, generally it doesn't crash. It just responds very badly. It gives timeout errors and that sort of thing. That's just normal. Okay, so good luck to everybody next week, though. My name on the birth certificate is Sohail, good, and passport is Sohail, bad. Okay, so your passport is wrong. Is there any problem if you win the lottery? Okay, you've got to correct your passport, is what you've got to do. Your birth certificate is what establishes your name, and your passport is wrong, right? Now, if you want to say your passport is correct and your birth certificate is wrong, which is the wrong order of things, but if you want to say that, then you actually have to do a legal name change to create the paperwork trail to support what it says on your passport and override what it says on your birth certificate, right? But is there a problem? Well, not really. There's not really a tremendous problem, because if you are selected, you'll go and get your passport corrected, won't you? That would be the smart thing to do. Okay. All right, everybody. Let's take another question. Ankara, EU 10.9K. Risky range, unfortunately, because at Ankara, unless they dramatically increase the number of appointments they're taking, then we're probably not going to get to EU 10.9K, which is frustrating. So many selectees in Turkey, obviously, and many of them won't get a chance because the number's just not going to get there, right? So if you can change, if you can still sort of get your embassy changed, which is very hard now because you've waited really too long. But if you were able to be changed to another embassy, then that might be the best thing to do. Do you know transfer from one to another without going to the country? Okay, so almost all embassies will ask you to prove that you are resident in that country, not just visiting, but resident in that country, prior to helping you transfer to their embassy. KCC will sometimes challenge people to prove that they're living in another country before they let someone transfer. And in general, they don't want to let people transfer. They want people to stay where they are. They don't want people traveling around in order to get interviews. That means that as far as KCC is concerned, and as far as the Department of State is concerned, they are fully aware and don't care that some people will lose their chances because of where they are, right? So that means higher case numbers in Addis Ababa, for example, they're going to lose their chances. Cases above maybe 10,000 in Accra, they're going to lose their chances. Cases in Ankara, they're going to lose their chances, right? That's just the way the government thinks it's okay to operate the system. And we have tried suing them, but they don't change that policy. It's purely up to the embassy themselves to set their capacity. And if the capacity is less than it needs to be in order to serve all the people locally, then so be it. That's just the way it is. As far as the Department of State is concerned, that's okay, right? So the smart way to operate is to get the hell out of that country before you're locked into that embassy. But I've been saying that for months, and many people didn't listen, and they will now lose their chances because they didn't listen to me back in January or back in December when I was telling people about these problems. Okay, so it's a shame. EU 36.5K, I am done. Could you ask KCC to invite me to the embassy? No. I had a long and frustrating interaction with someone, and it may be you because it was at your same. The name looks a little bit familiar, I have to say. I had this long and frustrating sort of conversation with this younger person. I could tell it was a younger person because he or she wasn't listening to what he was being told. And he was saying, I want to I've written to KCC to expedite my appointment. I'm EU 36,000, and they told me they wouldn't do it. So now I'm going to write to the MVC, and I kept telling this guy, MVC has got nothing to do with your case. There is no expedite process. You can't ask KCC or an embassy or anyone else to interview your case before your case number is available, before your case number is concurrent. So there is no way you can push them to do that. And I went through this frustrating conversation, and frankly, in the end, I just lost my temper with this guy because I told him 7 times. I'm not kidding, 7 times, and he just kept coming back with the same questions and the same, the same perspective, that somehow I wasn't answering his question or something. So, frustrating when people won't listen. But no, there is no way that you could ask, or anyone could ask, or I could ask KCC to invite you to the embassy until your case number is current. And people lower than your case number will have more access to the embassy and to the appointments than you will too. So EU 36.5, I'm not sure that you're done, but yeah, you're very much at risk, and there's nothing you can do about that. To have a chance in Cameroon at 59k, yes you do. I already answered one at 73k in Cameroon, so at 59k you've got a chance. My case number is Asia 207 ... so 20,000. UAE, do you think I have a chance to get the interview? Your case number is very high. I'm beginning to see that unless the government quite dramatically increase the numbers in the next 1 or 2 visa bulletins, we're not going to get to that sort of number, Asia 20,000. They're just leaving too much work for the last minute, and it's frustrating. I know that UAE, it's a smallish embassy, but they have been very determined to issue as many visas as they possibly could in the past. They've really worked hard to do that. In fact, I found a Facebook Live that team did. There was a couple of consular officers who talked about their efforts. This was last year during DV 2023, and they talked about their efforts to schedule as many cases as they possibly could, to issue as many DV visas as they possibly could. They're really keen to do that, but it depends on KCC making the Asian visa bulletin as a whole above your number, and that's going to be a big risk no matter what UAE you want to do. So anyway, good luck. That's all you can hope for. Mustaf says, my case is if oh dear. I'm slightly dyslexic, so when I read bad English, it kind of throws me off a bit. My case is current and my embassy is not progressing. Can I change my case to another well-performing embassy? The problem is that if you wait until you're current and then you try and change your embassy, you've really waited too long. You should have changed before you became current. Once you're current, you go into a status called AV, and you're in the AV queue, the queue of people in AV status. And at that point, KCC won't unlock your DS-260 anymore. So the right way of changing your embassy location is by unlocking your DS-260 and changing your address to a different country, because you've moved to that different country, right? And then when you've done that, 2 or 3 weeks after you've resubmitted your form, you casually contact KCC and say, hey, I've moved my country. I assume that means that you're going to schedule me at this embassy, not the old embassy. Could you confirm, right? Just a casual confirmation of what would be logical, right? You're not asking for an embassy change. If you ask for an embassy change, KCC will say no 9 times out of 10. They'll just automatically reject your request. And they'll note that you're trying to change your embassy. And so asking for an embassy change is a bad idea. But unlocking a DS-260 and changing your address, that is a way to achieve an embassy change, right? But you've waited too long, and now KCC wouldn't even unlock your case, your DS260, to allow the address change. So I think you've probably waited too long. There is one way that you can change your situation, and that's by moving to another country, contacting the embassy in that country and saying, hey, I'm local to you, and I'd really like to get my interview appointment moved here. Can you do that? Can you, Mr. Embassy, contact KCC on my behalf and ask them to move the case to this embassy? If that embassy do that, which is rare, but it does happen, if they do that, then KCC will oblige them. They won't oblige you asking for the same thing, but they will agree if the embassy asks them, they will agree to move your case, right? Because it's the embassy asking, not you. So that's the only way you can do it after that point, right? Okay, Brett, good day. Monrovia, Liberia, that's great. DS260 has been processed, that's great. AF72, yeah, most DS260s have been processed now. There are still some people who are waiting, but generally speaking, those cases are delayed for additional background checks. I think by now it's pretty safe to assume that every case that was originally submitted has been opened, and where it could have been processed, it's been processed. And if additional checks are required on that case, then then that will take a little bit longer. That does mean that there are people out there with like case number Africa 100,000 that have been processed, and that's because DS260 processing is not to do with the case number. I know lots of people are saying, oh, yes, it is. I know my friend who's got this. And, those people who say that, I'm sorry, they're just wrong. And they're not very bright either, because there's some obvious questions like, critical thinking. Let's talk about critical thinking. If for every theory that you have, you only have to think about the possible scenarios that you would see if your theory was correct. So for the people that have the theory that DS260 processing is by case number, they would have to say, okay, what possible scenarios could happen if it was by case number? And what you would have heard is, you would have heard from people who submitted their case, let's say, in quite late, let's say about November or December, right? But they had a low case number, and magically their DS260 was processed within 2 or 3 weeks, and they got scheduled because their case number was very low. And we don't hear stories like that. We never hear stories like that, right? And I've been doing this 10 years, and we just don't hear stories like that. So until we get to the point where all DS260s have been opened at least one time, that doesn't happen, right? So in November, there's still a backlog, for example. And if you submit late with a low case number, you're not suddenly vaulted to the front of the queue, which destroys the stupid theory of DS260s being processed in case number order, right? It just destroys it. If you have any concept of critical thinking, that's how you do it, right? You have a theory and you test your theory with all the possible scenarios. And I've done that a million times, and people can't answer that one I just gave. Like, why is it then that we don't hear from people who say, well, I didn't submit my DS260 until November the 3rd or whatever, and they told me in December it was processed? It doesn't happen. Just doesn't happen, right? And if that's the case, if that doesn't happen, that means that theory of DS260s being processed in case number order is not true. That's literally what that means. Okay, so yeah. What is the minimum qualification for a derivative spouse? No qualification at all. There is no qualification for a derivative spouse. Where's my dog going nuts? I don't know why my dog's going nuts. It was my dog's birthday yesterday. She was 7 years old, bless her. We had a little birthday party for her. And she got very nervous because she wondered why she was getting all the attention. So there you go. Yeah, there is no minimum qualification for a derivative spouse, none at all. There is no requirement of educational work experience or anything else. Can I be winner for 2 consecutive years? Yes, that sometimes happens. It's just because there's some people enter and just get lucky twice in a row. It's just the way it works. It's because it's a random draw. Hi Simon, keep on doing the job. I'm now in Michigan. Transferred my case from ACC to Freetown. Good idea. Well done. Abdul, you're a smart fella, and I know you're going to do well in Michigan. Bit concerned you chose to move to Michigan. You know how cold it gets in the winter, but I'm sure you've got good reasons why. So there you go. Crybaby11, Simon, your knowledge of DV lottery is beyond excellent. I know. Thank you for freely assisting. You're very welcome. I was just thinking the other day, I started helping people in DV 2013. I started helping in 2013. I started learning about the process. I actually applied in DV 2013, so that was the first year, and I started talking about that and actually opened my blog in 2014, I think it was. So I've been doing this well over 10 years now, and I'm sure I don't know the number of people that I've helped, but I'm sure it's over 100,000 by now of people that have got some information from me. Almost every blogger, YouTuber, that is out there is using some information that I discovered, reasoned through, theories that I've put out there that I've later proved, things like the Holes theory, the way that cases are scheduled, all of that. I mean, tons of stuff, right? Stuff that we just consider normal now, and everybody knows about. It wasn't normal when I started that we had all this information. It wasn't normal at all. The first SEAC extracts we got were back in 2014, I think it was, or maybe 2013. But it was pretty early, and that was when we started to learn quite a bit about the processing. So what is considered to be common knowledge today, it wasn't common knowledge back then, which is why I learned what I learned. Right. So Assad, I don't know why Poppy is going nuts. So sorry about the dog barking if you can hear that. Assad says, I've asked this question many times. Oh, that's always a bad way to start, because I get frustrated when people ask the same question over and over again, or when they ask me questions like, I've just answered something and they come back and they say, are you sure? Or how do you know that? Kind of frustrates me. So I've asked this question many times. I know it's weird to ask again because my case number is 14,000 something from Asia, from Afghanistan. Do I have a chance? Thanks for your guidance. Look, I can say to you again, I believe you have asked this question before. I think you have a chance. That doesn't mean that you've got a guarantee, but you have a chance. I don't think we're going to see the visa bulletin end less than your number. I think I would be shocked if that happened, right? And in general, Afghans are being treated pretty well through the system. It depends on which embassy you're at. But in general, you have a chance. So yeah, you have a chance. Those are the things you have to consider. So no need to keep asking me the same question. So there you go. I saw 10 2NL sent to Dakar cases on the 19th. Is that realistic? I don't know that that's true. I thought it was 9 actually. Dakar. Let's see. I could be wrong. I don't know all of the embassies off by heart, just some of them. No, you're right. It was 10. Yeah, so on 419, there were 10. Yeah, 10 for Africa. So yeah, that's true. That's interesting, considering they've done nothing since the end of the year, right? The end of last year. So that is pretty big news in a sense. That's at least they're doing something. Now, 10 cases, not very many, obviously. That's kind of frustrating, but at least it's something. So it opens up some hope. And they've scheduled cases up to about 26,000. So, they're heavily backlogged, of course, and they will remain heavily backlogged until they increase those numbers. But at least they've done something. So is it realistic? I mean, it's real information. We can give you the actual case numbers. I mean, it's very easy to get that information from Zarthisius's website. In fact, I think he's probably showing it right there. Yeah. So you could just literally, you could put that in Dakar. Case number, I have all of them. But anyway, yes, it's realistic. Good afternoon, Brett. My interview is soon. What are the necessary preparation I need to do qualifying with work experience? Thanks. Okay, T7 Entertainment. Let me go through that. It's a question I don't often get asked. So let me explain what you do if you want to qualify through work experience. First of all, if you qualify through education, that is easier. It's easier to do education, and that's normally the way that consular officers would try and qualify a case, because it's not so subjective. Work experience is a subjective measurement. Now, the rules say that you need 2 years of experience within the last 5 years. That's within the last 5 years prior to the interview day, right? And you've got to have 2 years of experience at a job which takes about 2 years to train for. Now, the training piece of that statement isn't what's important. It's performing the job, however you got that job, whether you trained for that job, whether you were trained on, at work and you were promoted to that job, whether you went to some sort of vocational training or whatever, however you got into that job doesn't matter. What matters is that you've got 2 years of experience. So then how do you prove that to a stranger, right? Well, typically someone who is doing a job at the level that we're talking about would be paid a bit more than other people. So you would show them financial history, right? Showing that you're paid well because you do a job which is a skilled job or a professional job, something that took some sort of training and expertise to fulfill that job. You would show them your CV or resume, as it's called in America. You could show them letters from your employer that details out your career history with that employer, for example, and that states your job duties and that sort of thing. If you can get a letter like that from your employer, that's great. You could show them work output. It depends what you do, but if you're, let's say, your name suggests you're in the entertainment industry, right? So let's say you produced videos and you were some sort of, some professional within that world. You would want to show credits on work that has been produced that is publicly consumed that shows your name and that you had, a place in that process. So depending on what your job is, there could be various things that you can present: qualifications, maybe evidence of training if you took it, maybe some sort of work output, as well as your resume, CV, as well as your financial history, as well as a letter from your employer, right? Those extra things are useful to have. Now, the rules say for the consular officer that they will make their decision based on the preponderance of evidence, which means if you have the right sort of evidence, right, presented nicely in some sort of binder or folder or something like that, where you say, yeah, this is my letter from my employer, and this is my pay slips. It shows I earn, a good amount of money compared to other people because I'm a supervisor, and this is, some work output or whatever it is, right? You show them that stuff in a professional, detailed way, then they're going to say, well, the evidence that I have in front of me shows that you are qualified for the job, for the visa rather, and therefore I'm going to approve you, right? They're not looking to catch you out. They're looking for you to just have prepared a little bit, and that's all you need to do. Just prepare so that you can satisfy a stranger, so that he can check a box saying, yep, I saw all the evidence of work experience. That's all it is. It's not too bad at all. But it has to be the right sort of job. That's the other thing. You need to also, important thing, go to ONET online and make sure your job qualifies. First of all, it needs to be in job zone 4. It needs to be an SVP greater than 7, right? Which ONET online. If you don't understand what I'm saying, go to Google the word Brett Simon work experience, and you'll come up with a blog page that explains how to do what I'm about to say. But you go to ONET online, you find your job, the job that you're saying is the job you perform, and you show that you do the work duties that are described in that page, etc. And I would print out the ONET page if I were you, showing the job zone and that sort of thing. Just make the decision really easy for the CEO, that they can say, yes, I see the job that you do. I agree that's the job you do. The job you do is the one described in ONET Online, because the title might be a little bit different, right? And the work duties you say you perform, I can see on the ONET Online, it says, yeah, works with computers, works with this sort of software. He's supposed to be a project manager, works with Microsoft Project or whatever is, Monday.com or whatever project management software you use. So, there are ways that you can connect your job and your role to that is described on the ONET database, and that's what they care about. That's exactly what they care about, right? So you make that connection very, very clear. That's important. Okay. All right. Good luck with that. Anyway, T7 Entertainment. I know you've been a listener for quite some time, so good luck with your interview. Can 62K become current in the next visa bulletin next month? Africa, I assume you're talking about. I would say very likely. I'm expecting the Africa region to increase. In fact, I'm hoping. Well, let me just sort of caution this. I'm hoping more than I'm expecting. I'm hoping to see a pretty big increase in each of the regions, at least the three large regions. Probably not South America and Oceania. I'm not expecting big increases for those two. But for the other three, the big regions, Africa, EU, and Asia, I'm expecting to see fairly big increases, because we need to see more interviews. They've scheduled so far for June, they've scheduled just under 2,900 interviews around the world. And it's not enough. And part of the reason it's not enough is because they're not moving the visa bulletin up as high as I would like to see them doing that. And so I'm hoping they'll move the visa bulletin a bit more so that they can get more interviews. And right now, as it stands right now, they're not going to issue all 55,000 visas unless they do something different in this next 3 months. They've got to increase the scheduling, basically. Okay. Hello, Simon. So far, my DS260 has not been processed since that normal, and I submitted early and completed my number AS700 or something. Okay. Ahmed, I'm going to make a horrible generalization, and I'm going to assume, based on your name, that you're from the Middle East somewhere, right? And it could be that your name and your location and perhaps the work you do or the cities you visited or something else, something has caused a delay in the processing of your case. It may be entirely innocent. It may not be your fault or anything to do with you, but it just has caused a delay. So even though you submitted early, you're still waiting for that to be processed. The only good news I can tell you is that they really do try and clear the decks of all the DS260s as much as they can anyway, prior to the release of the new results. Because in a week's time, they're going to start getting in DV 2025 DS260s, and they have to take some part of their team and their resources and start working on those next year's DS260s, right? So I'm hoping that they're going to clear up those sort of delayed cases over the next couple of weeks before there's too much of a influx of cases for DV25. There's nothing that you can do about it, unfortunately. It's just the way it is. So, good luck. How are you? Thanks for this program. It's really helpful for us, mostly we Africans. So I'm glad to hear that it's helpful to Africans, but I'd like to help people all around the world. So, I don't really mind where you're from. So just happy to help. Marwan, my family name spelling is a little different than my education certificate. Does that a problem for me? Certificate? No, the only problem that you have is your name isn't established by your education certificate, but your education certificate needs to be shown to be yours, right? So the birth certificate is where your name comes from, and it's backed up by the passport, right? But you now have to prove that this education certificate that you've got is really your certificate. It's not somebody who's got a similar name to you. So, just think about how you do that, how you prove that, right? How you prove you attended that school. What other information do you have? Was this just a very simple one-letter mistake on your name, or is it a completely different name? That would be more difficult to prove, obviously. Okay, so do what you can to think about that. Greetings, sir. For those of us who ended on 221G last year, should I case we win this year, are we supposed to have filled the DS260 to have been refused for a US visa before? Great question. No, if you were on if you were on 221G and the year ended, you weren't actually refused. Your case was sort of in limbo. It was temporarily refused. So I would answer that question no, that you've not been refused a US visa before based on what I just said. Now, I know the status is refused, but it's not like a final refusal, okay? So my answer to that, and I'm not a lawyer, but the way I would answer that is no, right? Now, if you've had some other visa refused, then obviously be honest about that. They know all the visas you applied for and were refused for. So there's no point in lying about any of that, obviously. You just give the most honest answer you can. But my honest answer about someone who is on 221G and then the year ends is that you didn't get finally adjudicated. You didn't get a final answer on your case. Therefore, you weren't refused. Okay. Will Africa reach 75K? It's possible. It is possible, right? So I'm got my fingers crossed. I'm hoping they do. In Nepal, they didn't get 2NL cases from 71,000, 7,100 to 8,500. Does this mean next month VB will be low? It's actually an insightful point you're making, right? What I'm hoping actually is that Kathmandu gets some more interviews scheduled in this next couple of days, in the next few days from Monday. The month isn't over yet. And so, they could send out some more interviews for June. If they don't do that, then as you've rightly anticipated, there is a bit of a backlog. But KDU has an amazing capacity. They can take up to 800, 900 cases in a month. And what they could do is they could take a large number of cases for July and then move a bunch of those cases into June, because if they haven't taken cases for June yet, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that they will not move the visa bulletin up for Nepal. Doesn't necessarily mean that, although it's quite an insightful thing that you've thought of that makes you realize that's built up a bit of a backlog. And therefore, how do they deal with that backlog? One way would be to keep the Nepal number low, but I don't think that's the option they would choose. We'll have to wait and see. Right? There isn't a guaranteed way they would deal with that. But good question though. Glad to see you thinking. What causes this VB to go very slowly? Do you think they will reach this VB up to 80K? You're talking about Africa again with stuff, right? The VB is not moving slowly. The problem is that there are a massive number of selectees in this year, and there is no reason for us to have that number of selectees in this year. They selected 143,000 people. There are only 55,000 visas. So a lot less than half of the people that have been selected will get visas. A lot more than half the people are going to be disappointed, right? And so you think the visa bulletin is moving slowly because it's not getting to those higher number ranges. Well, it was never going to get to those higher number ranges. That was never the plan. That was only going to be the plan if something catastrophic happened in the region that meant that many of these cases couldn't be interviewed. So so it's not moving as slowly as you think. It's moving slower than I would want. And I do think there's a possibility, just a possibility, that we'll get to 80K something, or above 80K. But I think in general, it's more likely we'll see a cutoff of under 80K. But I'm hoping it'll be sort of 75 to 80K, that sort of number. But we might get into the 80s. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, so fingers crossed. Daniela has an interview in June in Frankfurt. Good luck. Make sure you're crossing your fingers. Prepare well, and it's normally a very easy process. And I'm sure it'll be good for you. Greetings from Amsterdam. Lovely. Sarah says, do you still think EU 30,500 is getting interviewed? I hope so. I'd be, again, like I said earlier, about 14K in Asia. I would be shocked if they don't get to 30K. So you're in the right sort of range. I mean, it will be, it'll be quite a shock if they didn't get to that number. We're not that far from it. I could easily see a 3,000 or 4,000 increase this month, maybe the same again next month, and we'll be within striking distance of that number. So, yeah, I think you're probably going to be okay. Hi, Britt. I just found out I jumbled up my travel history in the DS260 by entering a certain period twice. Will that affect my case as it's set for interview for June 12th? No, it wouldn't affect your... So number one, you're set for the interview, so there's nothing you can do. You can't really unlock at this point. But, saying you've been to, I don't know, Bulgaria twice is better than nothing, right? It doesn't matter that you've been twice. It's just that they can say, oh, well, he can't remember the dates correctly. He's said twice when he really means one time. But at least they knew that you'd been to Bulgaria, right? That's the important thing. They have the history that you've been to that country. And if that means that they've got to do some sort of additional background check based on whatever that country is, then at least they had the opportunity to do that. So the fact that you listed it twice isn't really a big problem. It's a bit dopey, but it's not really a big problem, right? Okay, Joseph. On DS260, we had to specify an address, but that address can be changed on the port of entry with the CBS officer as well, right? Yes, that's true. I would personally not leave it that late, but if you have to change it, that is what I tell people is the last time you can change it. The address I have given is the address of a friend of a friend. Well, that's good. You're not expected to live at that address. It really is just the place where the green card and the social security number will be sent. And the reason I say that the last chance you have to change that is at the port of entry is because that is the point that your paperwork is taken from you and sent off to the government agencies that issue the green cards, but also separately issue the social security number, right? So that address needs to go to a couple of different places. And even though there is a facility to change your address online after you've entered the country, in my experience, that doesn't always update where the green card is going to be sent, and it certainly won't update where the social security number will be sent, because that's a different agency, right? So you are required to change your address once you've entered the States, and every time you change your address, you're supposed to report that change of address to the government on form, I think it's AR11 or something. It's an online form. So just Google USCIS and then change of address. You're required to update that every time you move, right? And you should comply with that while you've got a green card. Once you become a citizen, you no longer have to let them know where you're living, right? It's only while you've got the green card. But yeah, do that. Do that. But don't expect that online change of address form to change where your social security number or your green card will be sent. It won't always work, right? So the last chance is at the port of entry, as you say. Okay. 3,000 cases this month, not that bad, Vlad, not quite what I want. 2,900. I was really holding out for 3,500, as you know, Vlad. There was 757, I think it was, in EU. I know you're mostly interested in EU. I think it was 757. So it was an increase. It was the best month we've seen for the last few months. But it's not sort of at the pace that we really need to see all the visas being issued, right? So if you look at where they are, let's just have a quick look at that. Others will find this interesting. I think if we look at where we are right now in terms of, let me just make this bigger. Yeah. If we look at this data, we say, okay, how many visas are issued? They issued 22,576. And then these 371 are in AP status, which means they're essentially as good as issued. Is that AP status is a special process where they're actually printing the visa. So all 371 of those will get their visas issued. So there's about 23,000 issued so far. They scheduled 2,500 interviews for May, and nearly 3,000 for June, nearly 2,900, right? So it's what, 5,500, 5,400, scheduled beyond the end of this month, right? Which would be about 10 or 11,000 people. Not all of those are going to be approved. Let's say 8,000 of those would be approved. So 8,000 on top of 23,000, that gets us to 31,000. So then in the remaining 3 months, they have to issue about 20,000, which means they really need to put their foot down on the gas to issue at least 7,000 or 8,000 visas per month, right? And to issue 7,000 or 8,000 visas per month, you need to schedule something like 3,500, maybe even 4,000 cases to get to that level. And if they don't do that, we're not going to hit the 55,000, which is fine by the government. They don't care. If they get to 50,000, they'll be fine. But even to get to 50,000, they still need to sort of do quite a bit of work. We will see some of the 221Gs convert, of course, there's 4,000 of them. So 4,000 people are in 221G. Let's say 3,000 of those become issued at some point, 2,000, 2,500 perhaps. So there are some in the system that will become issued, but still they're still undershooting. So they do need to. There's reason why I've been saying for 3 months they need to hurry up. They need to put their scheduling shoes on. So there is a reason why I'm saying that. I'm not just making it up, right? I've calculated the numbers. They're shooting low at the moment. AF61K from Morocco. What do I think? I think you're probably going to be okay, but you have to wait and see. DF24, case number 47K in Cairo. Any chances? I don't know. You see, I can't quite tell where the final numbers for Egypt will be. I haven't had enough feedback from people to know what the highest case number is and do any math on that. So you'll have to just wait and see as well. See what happens. You may want to check in with Sahar. He's probably got a better handle on it than me. He probably understands better than I. So Sahar Atia, who's got a YouTube channel and is a great friend to the Egyptian selectees. He's got a lot of information for them. So and he says the right stuff. He's a smart guy. He's probably got better information. Okay. All right. Joker, what include background checks before the announcement of the results is checked? There's lots, Joker. I could spend all day talking about that. The main thing, the draw is actually made in December or January. And between that time and the results being announced, they go through a lot of things, but they're not really looking for background checks in the same way that they do after the interview. They're looking to check the photos. They disqualify a lot of cases for photos, a lot of cases because of that. They look for fraudulent entries. They look for signs of fraudulent entries, duplicate entries, that sort of thing, and they disqualify some of those. So they're just going through, and in general, they've automated a lot of that process. So it's just a sort of a number crunching exercise. Some of the fraudulent entries, by the way, they're picking up through photographic recognition. So if let's say you've entered your photo. Let's say you take 2 different photos, right? And you have 2 different names somehow and 2 different addresses. There's nothing to connect your 2 duplicate entries, but you're the same person in the in the photo, then they've got photo recognition software that can detect that can say this person is the same as that person, right? So you may think you're a smart ass and that you can get around their system, but you really can't. And once you're recognized as being someone who is fraudulently entering, they can, if they want, add you to a list of people who are always going to be disqualified. And so from that point onwards, you're never then going to be selected. So don't do that. I mean, it's just dumb to try and do that. In the old days, prior to all the technology they've got, maybe you could get away with it, but you can't get away with it now. So don't do it. With the current trend in Ghana, it even looks bleak for 9K. This is terrible. I agree with you on both points. It is a bit risky for even 9K, 10K in Ghana. It's bleak. Yeah, it is terrible. Shameful. I think it's absolutely pathetic. If you look at the recent, let me just show you something here. Let me just show you monthly statistics. Right. So I've probably shown you this before. Let's just show you this webpage. You can see what they've done, and they've just published the numbers for March. Right. So for every embassy, you can come in here and see, what number of visas were issued. So Accra issued during the month of March. They issued 2 DV visas, which is pathetic, right? Absolutely pathetic. Now, look at the same embassy, IR1, IR2, and IR5. Look how many immediate relative cases they did. Now, I've explained this before in multiple episodes of my lives and other videos that I've created. IR is the category for immediate relatives. This is parents of a US citizen or a child of a US citizen where they are adopting a child or something like that. It's those sort of immediate relatives. It's not brothers and sisters. That would be family-based sponsorship. This is immediate relatives for US citizens only. So in a sense, I understand why embassies prioritize these cases higher than any other category, but they should share the spotlight a little bit. What this means is that Accra is spending an enormous amount of time processing IR category visas, and because of that one thing, they are not doing anything for the DV lottery, or almost nothing for DV lottery, which is, it's not fair, it's not right, and so it sucks. So Accra do better, but in a month where they can issue here 500 immediate relative visas to only do 2 DV, where DV run out of time and the IR category don't run out of time, that is sick. I mean, it's just not fair, not right. So they should do better, but we can't force them to do better. That's their right to prioritize that way if they choose, and if they've got a backlog. There are other embassies that probably don't have the same amount of backlog, and that's why. It may be, what are these, IR2s and IR5s? I forget the categories now. But there's a lot of IR2s which are children you could look up the categories, but there are slightly different. IR1 through 5 are different categories of visas for immediate relatives, depending on what type of relative this is. Is this a natural born child? Is this an adopted child? That sort of thing. They have different categories. So there's a lot of children being sponsored by US citizens in America. So not quite sure why that is a bigger thing in Accra. Not quite sure why. Maybe the adoption process is easier in Ghana. I don't know. But anyway, what do I think about EU 3155 something? Has a chance. You have to wait and see. Why some embassy rushing your case 221G while all of your regarding is right? I have no idea what you're trying to say there, Mr. What do you think when will EU 30,500, when will they get the turnout? Well, probably almost certainly not before August, right? It's probably September, so that means a July 2NL for a September interview is probably what will happen. It could go faster than that. It might be August, but I think it's more likely that it would be September. And my question is, how many diseases are immunized during the medical? I don't know. Ask a doctor. You can find the immunization requirements pretty easily by Googling it, but I don't know how many diseases they immunize against. I'm not a doctor. My case number is 100K. Could I get 2NL? Almost certainly not, Mustafa. No. Any chance for 80K in Cairo, Egypt? Probably not. I don't know 100% for certain, but that number sounds very high for Egypt. So I'd say no. I recently got my interview and got my visa approved. Thank you for the support. Well done, Michelle. Nice. Nairobi, DS260 submitted February 23, interview May 23rd. Nairobi is notorious for asking AOS. Oh, affidavit of support. Must I get it? Also, if host is different from AOS person, will embassy question it? Right. So, last question first. It doesn't matter if the host is different from the person with affidavit of support. It can be different people. There's no problem with that. Must you get an affidavit of support? Well, you already know that Nairobi asks for that sometimes, right? So why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you get that? Why would you risk having delay? If you can get an affidavit of support, get it. If you can't, then show some other evidence of how you're going to support yourself. It could be because you've got a lot of savings yourself. It could be you've got a very good job prospects. Maybe you're in a type of job that's very much in demand in America. Maybe you've got a host that is, prepared to help you. But if not, an I-134 affidavit of support is a wise idea. And by the way, it is only that form, the I-134, not the I-864. Okay, you cannot use the I-864 in DV lottery. It has to be the 134. Okay, but anyway, good luck. People who is in visit visa in the US can apply for a status of adjustment of status. Yes, that is possible. It depends on, they must be in a legal status, and they must never have been out of a legal status while in America this time. But as long as they're in a legal status, then yes, they can apply for adjustment of status. The only thing is that if you're in a non-immigrant visa, like a B1, B2 particularly, you may not have time to wait to initiate your adjustment of status process, because there's a limited time that you can be in there. But be in America on that sort of visa. If you're on an F1 or a J1, you've got longer time and you've got financial situation taken care of. If you're on a B1 though, you're supposed to be visiting only. You're not supposed to be working. So how are you going to survive for 3 months while you wait for your number to become current and that sort of thing before you can file? It's more difficult with some of those visa types. Okay, so be careful. 110K Algeria, could I get to an L? No, that's not going to happen. Sorry about that, but it's not. Radina, hi Britt, hope you're good. I want to ask you if case number 27882 from Albania, is it a safe number? I can't say it's a safe number. It'll only be safe once you've got a visa in your hand, right? It's likely to go current. I believe it will go current. But there's things that can happen. There's stuff that can happen. So I can't tell you 100% it's safe. It's only safe when it's actually in your hand, right? Okay. I feel this year I win the 2025 green card visa by God, faith, US. Everybody feels they're going to be selected, whether it's your faith in God or whether it's just because you feel lucky. Nobody buys a lottery ticket, to win $1 million and says, I'm just wasting my money. Everybody that enters the lottery always feels they're going to win. There's a chance they're going to win, right? That's how it works. But but maybe you'll be selected, maybe you won't. I don't know, but good luck anyway. Chances for EU 55k, non-existent. No chance for that number, I'm afraid. Good day, sir. Thanks once more for what you've been doing. When I look at the SEAC data, I discovered Yaoundé last updated on the 12th of April. Can you please throw more light on what is happening? What more light? What would try and be a bit more clear in your questions? What more light? I don't know what more light you want me to shed. They took 2 NLs on the 12th of April, you're telling me. I'm sure that's right. What else do you want me to say? I don't know. 49k Cameroon, when can I receive my 2 NL? Can it be possible for the next visa bulletin? Cameroon, why would you not have received it? Let me just check. I thought they were pretty much up to date with the numbers. Hang on a second. Let's see, Cameroon. And same thing. We can check the April 12th. Yeah, let me just show you what I'm looking at here. So I've searched on Zathis. This is webpage here for Yaoundé. Our friend who was just talking about the I'm going to turn your message off for a moment. Our friend was saying about April 12th. Yes, there was 160 interview schedules were sent on that day. There was 3 the day before, so that's pretty good actually. They did 140 in the previous month, so that's again pretty good. 143. So look, here's just something I would say. Look, in January they took 121, right? In February they took 122. In March they took 143, and in let me just scroll down. Yeah, in April, with April being for June interviews, they took 163. So they're increasing each month, which is nice to see, right? They're not decreasing. So that's a good thing. Now, in terms of where they've got to, the highest case number that they have scheduled is something about 48 to 49,000. So your question, 111 Beck at 49k, you're probably going to get your 2NL next month, right? It's probably going to be in the next batch. And when they send a batch, you can see this green color here. When they send a batch of interviews, you can also move the time bar. Let me just show you that. If I go back to the beginning of the month, for example, that's the end of last month, you can see, the 163 took them from 42,000 or so to 48,000. So they're moving about 6,000 or 7,000 visa bulletin numbers or range numbers in 1 month with 163 appointments, right? So that tells you roughly, you can see here they've got about, each one of these is 2,000. So the average of these is about 40 to maybe 45. So you half that, about 22. So they've got about 20 cases, 22, maybe 23 cases per 1,000. So when they send out 163, that's like saying they can move up to 8,000. Although what actually happens is they spend a few of those appointments on lower case numbers, depending on the AVQs and that sort of thing. It's a bit complex. I have explained that before, and there is a video that explains how they actually set all this up, how the queues operate, etc. I've explained all of that. But what it roughly means is that in the next month, which will be for July interviews, your case at 49k is almost certain to be interviewed. You're going to be interviewed in July. Okay, so good luck with that. Kindly, any chance for Egypt to be current, or that's impossible? Yeah, it's impossible. Hi, Britt. Is there a favourable time to check the upcoming results in a bit to increase the chances of getting selected? The only sort of favourable time to check the results is to actually, if you want to save your sanity, just wait for a day. It doesn't matter if you find out first, and it doesn't change your chance of being selected by checking it at a specific time of the day or anything like that. Your chance that you've been selected or you haven't been selected, right? That won't change no matter on when you check it, right? There is no favourable time that makes a difference about that. But if you want to drive yourself nuts, then start checking at noon on Saturday the 4th. May the 4th be with you. But you will be driving yourself nuts, because that system is going to be overwhelmed for the first few hours, maybe the first day. So you probably want to wait until the Sunday or maybe even the Monday, and then you'll be able to just check very easily. Okay, but anyway, good luck. I have 2 names on my academic documents and 3 names on my birth certificate and passport. Will this be an issue on the interview? No, not a problem at all. I explained earlier why academic certificates and documentation is not where you prove your names from. It's very normal for you to not list all of your names on, on a school document. So don't worry about that. Not a problem. I have a big inquiry. Why the new people who enter the DV lottery mostly win the 1 or 2 tries, but the people who play or participate many, many years, their chances are low. Many people participate many years, but without any chance to win. Please make a research about that. Look, I can tell you exactly why that happens. Let me just have a little bit of coffee to prepare. It happens because it's random, right? You think that that there is some sort of advantage for people who've only entered 1 or 2 times. That's bullshit. There is not an advantage to only entering 1 or 2 times. It is not true to say that people mostly win 1 or 2 times. But obviously, those are the stories that you've heard. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean it's real. The lottery chances are 100% random. There is no preference given to people who've entered multiple times. There is no lesser or preference given to people who've entered for the first time or the second time. That's all complete nonsense, and there is no logic to it at all. So whatever you think you've observed is a bad observation. It's a mistake in your assessment. So that's literally the answer. Okay. So, and on average, if people are only going to be selected once in 100 years, on average, most people will never get selected. By far, most people will never get selected, right? So, and people give up after a while, right? Some people consistently try, and as I say, I've seen people who've tried for 10 years and 12 years and 15 years, and eventually maybe they give up. Maybe that's your answer of why your observation is wrong, is because you're not really sort of getting through to people who've tried year after year after year, because most people don't keep trying like that. They try maybe a couple of years, 3 years or something like that, and then they say, oh, that's never going to happen. They give up, right? And so that's the reality. But there's not, because it's true. Okay. Hello, I am connected to your video. I am the winner of DV 2024. I went through the interview in November. Until now, my case was refused due to 1G. You've been waiting a long time, Mohammed. I hope that gets resolved quickly for you, or soon. Not quickly, but we'll see. How do you think the next VB is going to go? I think the numbers are going to go up, but I haven't put specific numbers out there for each of the regions. But I do hope and kind of expect them to increase the numbers pretty well. Hi, my case number is AS 4100. I have already submitted the DS260 form on 9th of May 2023, but till now I've not received the interview email. Mayor Weiss, it would be nice to know which embassy you're at, because that's probably what's holding you back. Okay. Any chance for AS 17,000 something? Yes, you've got some chance. Not guaranteed, but you've got some chance. Mustaf says, if I got lottery for 2 consecutive years, you've asked a lot of questions, Mustaf. But anyway, if I got lottery for 2 consecutive years and due to high case number, I lost my first winning, could I tell officer my interview day that I was also selected for the last DV lottery? Yeah, no harm in that. There's no harm in saying you've been selected more than once. It's absolutely normal. I hear of those sort of cases every single year. People who've been selected a second time or a third time even, I've heard. So I've seen all sorts of things. Husband and wife both selected in the same year. Husband and wife both selected in the same year, and in the previous year, one of them was selected. I mean, loads of things like that. If you've got 20 million entries, you will have, statistically speaking, you will have weird events like people being selected twice. You just will. You can work out the math on that, and it's pretty obvious that you're going to get things like that, and there's nothing wrong with it. Okay. Quick one. What about 2019 batch? That's completely over. I don't know what you mean. DV 2019. Do you mean DV 2020? That's still under appeal. That's still a lawsuit going forward. So, but 2019 is over. Okay, another question here. I lived in Europe as asylum seekers in 2015, got resident for 2 years. But in 2017, they refused to change my residence and I traveled to Holland and Germany. Is there a problem if I win DV? If you broke laws and immigration laws in other countries, that can present a problem to America, because they think, look, if you're prepared to just ignore immigration laws and ignore laws in other countries, then you're going to do the same thing here. Why should we trust you? Why should we give you the benefit of the doubt? Right? Now, it's not a guarantee that you will have a problem, but you could have a problem. So I would say to anybody else, like, for goodness sake, just respect immigration laws. If you ever expect to enjoy benefit from immigration laws, just be respectful of those laws. Be respectful of all laws, but in particular, immigration laws, even in other countries. It's just dumb to cause yourself problems, frankly. Hi, Brett. Does it look to you now like they will reach EU 32K? It's always looked likely that they should get to that number. And will they get to that number? It depends whether they schedule enough appointments or not. They can't do it if they don't move the visa bulletin up fair amount more, and if they don't use the capacity that they could be using. We need to be seeing, I'd like to see in the EU, I'd like to see 1,000 interviews being scheduled. Certainly no less than this month, 750 or whatever it was. What was it? Let me show you the number there. There you go. Let me show you that. This is the number of interviews by region we have seen arranged for June. AF got 1,706. That's actually pretty good. I'd like to see more, of course, but that's pretty good. AS 325, that's a bit low. My target for that is normally 500. EU 757, my target for that is 1,000, but we saw 245 last month and 695 the month before that. So 757 is, it's not too bad. It's better. It's the best in 3 months, but I'd like to see more. We need to see more. OC 59, that's in the right numbers. I'd like to see a few more there. In South America, I'd like to see a few more, but it's not bad. So this is probably the number we'll end up at. There are a couple of embassies that we still haven't seen to announce for. KDU, for example, Kathmandu could easily change the picture for Asia. If they took a couple of hundred cases, that would mean a good month for Asia, right? But 2889, Vlad earlier said it was about 3,000. Well, it's just under 2,900. So that's not too bad, but it's not brilliant, right? I'd like to see more. Okay, let's scoot back to here. Right. Why a selectee who's already arrived here in the USA be asked to go to complete biometrics again after submitting the green card money for the green card? They've been given an appointment 2 months. That's okay. What happens is your biometrics, the first time they were collected, for whatever reason, weren't correct. They were perhaps unreadable or something like that. So they just ask, in some cases, they ask people to go and complete the biometrics. It doesn't always happen, but it's never, in my experience, it's never meant that there's some sort of problem. So it's just, a different problem. It just means the biometrics weren't processed in some correct way or whatever, and they need to try again. Okay, so don't worry about it. Nothing to stress about. Just go ahead and do that with them. Okay, I've spent a long time on today's call. Let me take one or two more questions if I can, and then we'll call it a day, right? ICC, I haven't seen any of your questions today, but you're always around, so let me answer a question for you. Impossible to calculate if a case number will get a chance in a certain embassy because I can't distinguish between case numbers in the country itself and other countries assigned to that embassy within the same region or with the same region. Yeah, the other countries thing doesn't really make any difference. It's just people with numbers, right? And you can apply some sort of averages. So if you saw me earlier, ICC, where I looked at an embassy and I worked out how many cases per 1,000, right? And I don't care, you wouldn't care how many cases per 1,000 were locals from that country or from other countries. It doesn't matter, right? But you can see the average number of cases per 1,000. And it's just an average, it's just a way of predicting. But you can therefore work out how many cases this embassy can take per month, which is what I've done for Addis, for example. I've worked out those numbers and I've published my thoughts about Addis, right? And we can't predict that an embassy is going to do more or less than they took last month, but we can take last month's numbers, capacity, and we can say if they continue at that pace, let's say Addis take 130 cases, how many thousands of case numbers would they move if Addis takes 130 cases per month? What if they move that to 160 cases? What if they do 250? We can do all those predictions, right? And it really doesn't matter whether those people are local or not. But yeah, we can do those predictions. And those predictions, frankly, are pretty accurate. And it's also one way, by the way, you can predict visa bulletins. You can do it that same sort of way. But my comments about the visa bulletin at the moment is that they need to push the numbers a little bit more than they actually need, because they could be using capacity in some of the really good embassies that are up to date with capacity, right? So, okay, well, let's see if I can find one more question. This will be a good question because it's relevant for DV 2025. What impact does it have how quickly one submits the DS260, e.g. on the first day or later, but on time, of course? Does this play a role in one's chances of getting an interview later on? This is a very misunderstood question. You will have seen, even in this video today, in April 27th, right? You would have heard from someone who submitted, I think, on May 9th, which is like a day or two after the results were announced last year, right? And they still have not had their DS260 processed, right? So for some people, even though they submit early, it takes a long time for their case to be processed. There are other people who submit early and they get processed very quickly. And we will have people being scheduled in August who submitted in May and have got very low case numbers, and they will be scheduled. They'll receive 2NLs in August for October interviews, right? That will happen in DV 2025. It did happen in DV 2024, and it happens every year, right? So submitting your DS260 early can help in some cases because you've got a low case number anyway. But if you've got a high case number, then as long as your DS260 is processed before your case number becomes current, then there's frankly no difference between you and anybody else that submitted their DS260, let's say, much later than you. There's no advantage given to you later by your early submission of the DS260. So for high case numbers, there is not so much of a chance. Now, there are people right now probably getting very worked up and very angry. I get people very angry at me every year, and it makes me giggle. There was one guy 3 or 4 years ago who got really, really pissed off with me and was angry at me because I told people in some cases, don't rush to submit your DS260s. And he didn't understand why I'd said that, and he had no clue. He was a little boy, he had no clue, right? His mum and dad didn't bring him up properly, so he was rude. But basically, he was saying that I'd ruined people's chances because I gave this advice. Well, the reality is that for some people, if their case number is very high, like if you're in DV 2024 and your case number is Africa 110,000 or something, and you submitted your DS260 on May the 8th last year or May 9th last year or something, it makes no difference to you. It doesn't help your case in any way, shape, or form, but it can make your non-immigrant visa application in the future much more difficult, right? In some cases. And that's what this little boy 3 or 4 years ago didn't understand. And that's why I had given specific advice about high case numbers, that the people with highest case numbers probably shouldn't rush to submit their DS260 and wouldn't get any benefit from rushing anyway, right? There are other cases where submitting your DS260 late can cause some difficulties because of the backlog. It might mean that you go current, but your DS260 has not been processed yet. And that means other cases, possibly with higher case numbers than yours, go before you and actually are in the AV queue before you. That can be significant. That can be a problem for some people. So the general advice that I would give is submit your DS260 fairly early. Don't rush it to the point where you make stupid mistakes. Do consider your case number. If it's very high, don't rush it at all. And if you're in certain embassies, like Accra, like Addis, you may want to just sort of pause and think, hang on a minute, my case number is Africa 30,000, I'm in Ghana, right? I'm in Accra. Maybe I would be better off not submitting my address in Ghana because my grandmother lives in, let's say, in Nairobi, right? And Nairobi are likely to be doing a better job in next year than Accra, right? So maybe I'll submit with the different address. I'll use my grandmother's address, and I'll go move there prior to the interviews, and I'll actually be living there, right? Because I live there sometimes, right? Because I'm not telling anybody to tell any lies. I'm just saying that you split your time between grandma's address in Nairobi and your other address in Accra, right? So you got to choose one of the addresses. So choose Nairobi. So what you need to do if you become a DV 2025 winner is actually use your brain and figure out, should I be submitting quickly? What other factors are going to affect my case? If I submit my DS260 and my case number never becomes current, is that going to be a problem when I want to apply for an F1 visa or something like that, right? So there are more things to think about than just rushing into submitting your DS260. It's a significant thing. You're applying for an immigrant visa and you can't ever take it back. You can't cancel that application, right? So it will always be on your record that you have shown immigrant intent, and that in itself can be a problem. So anyway, in general, for most people, for way more than 90% of people, they are better off to submit fairly quickly, but please take your time about filling in the DS260 for those of you that get selected in the DV 2025. Okay. All right, everybody, we'll call that a day. Thanks for joining me today. I hope this video was entertaining for you and helpful in your particular scenario. If I didn't answer your question, you can go ahead and ask your question on BritSimonSays.com. BritSimonSays.com. Best website in the world. But if you ask your question there, I will answer it. And otherwise, I'll see you in a few days' time. And may the 4th be with you. Fingers crossed for all of you that have entered DV 2025. Good luck. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.